Here we are in Altoona, Pennsylvania, on Logan Boulevard in the middle of the heart of Blair County. And here I am with Mark Koch. And Mark's going to tell us a little bit about this incredible space module and how it landed in the middle of Altoona. Mark, tell us about it.
What we have here behind us is an Apollo training capsule that was used to train the astronauts in the 1960s. It was also used to test the engineering that was used to develop the capsules that sent men to the moon. It was also used to train the recovery teams. We located this capsule behind a barn about 2 years ago. We recognized it as a significant piece of NASA history, so we rescued it. We went through a 2-year restoration. We brought it to Altoona to develop STEM programs, STEAM programs, and to introduce the arts into the effort to educate children, both young kids from an engineering standpoint, a technology standpoint, a science standpoint, and to inspire these kids to get an interest in what's coming up with the future programs.
Now, Mark, this isn't the first thing you've restored, is it? It's sort of an ongoing. You've restored some other pieces as well?
Yeah, we have a group that's put together that has done a lot of historic restorations. We restored the Andrea Doria #1 lifeboat. Last year we had it in the Columbus Day Parade. We towed it down Fifth Avenue. We had some of the survivors in the vessel, and it was tremendously a successful experience. We also put that boat in 2016 into the Hudson River and made 3 different trips out to the into the river to reintroduce these survivors to the sea experience that they went through in 1956, and it was a spectacular success. And we got a lot of positive feedback from it. Got a lot of press coverage in New York, and one of our key components of our project is to
we'll cut that part out, don't worry.
is to create a tangible link to the past. And whenever we introduce these artifacts that we've restored, it jogs the memory of the people that were involved in the history, and they share their experiences with us. We capture those, and then we use that to teach the next generation of children and individuals that are interested in the history of the event.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. Thanks for letting us use your space modules for today's presentation.
Hi, my name is Symphony Everett from the Altoona Symphony Orchestra. I'm here with my daughter, Grace Everett, and today we're going to be presenting the very first virtual cushion concert for the Altoona Symphony Orchestra. Now, this concert is going to be the first of a series of 3 concerts that we're going to call Traditions and Legacies. And it's going to highlight the relationship, really, that Grace and I have to songs that we've grown up with, that we've passed down to our family, and that we're taking on to the next generation through the younger generation. And we're so excited to be here today in this awesome space module. And you're going to hear a little bit more about that too as the concert progresses. But today we'd like to also we have wonderful sponsors that have sponsored our Cushion Concert Series. And those sponsors are the T. Dean Lauer and Jane Young Lauer Trust and the Wolf Kuhn Foundation. So thank you so much to those foundations for supporting the Cushion Concert Series. Now, today's overarching theme, I kind of came up with this funny title. It's called Spooky Tunes from Outer Space. And we're going to highlight the music of Halloween that we relate to, some of them from the classical tradition, the folk tradition, even the jazz tradition, and we'll be explaining some of these tunes as we go along. But we're going to start out with the classic tradition. And as you may know, Grace is my daughter. She was also my student in school. She had me as her orchestra director, her violin teacher, her drama instructor. I directed several musicals that she was in. So it was a little hard to get away from mom growing up, but it worked out. And if you might not know this, Grace is a senior at Penn State University and is a music ed major, and she's going to be going on to do her student teaching. So we're excited to do these series of concert before she leaves for student teaching, and then hopefully goes on to be a teacher in the music realm, and really excited for Grace. So the very first piece we're going to be performing today is a classic when you think of the Halloween classical tunes. And this is In the Hall of the Mountain King, written in 1875 by Edvard Grieg. He was a Norwegian composer, and if you remember, the piece comes from a suite, the Peer Gynt, story. And Peer Gynt was written by Ibsen in 1867, so not very long before the piece was written. If you remember the great story of Peer Gynt, and I don't know if you remember, we kind of did a fun lesson in this on drama class one year, but Peer Gynt was a man, he was a human, was raised by his mom, but he was not a good boy. He was sort of a bad boy, and he kind of kept getting into trouble all the time, and he kept falling in love with these girls and then kind of running away from them or scaring them away or things like that. But he fell in love with the maid that came to him who said she was the daughter of the Mountain King. And he was very in love with her, and he wanted to marry her. But if he married her, he had to become a troll like the Mountain King. And so in this dream, he envisions the Mountain King being upset with him because when you marry the Mountain King's daughter, you become the Mountain King. And so he had this terrifying vision of what would happen to him when the Mountain King found out he was going to marry his daughter and become the Mountain King and overthrow the Mountain King. So it's a great story. Now, the one thing I wanted to mention about all these classical tunes is they're set sort of in a different area in the 19th century when a lot of the macabre was being investigated. We know that a lot of the books, think of Bram Stoker's Dracula, right in around that same time period, 1897. Of course, we had Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, early 19th century, 1818. But there was definitely some exciting things going on in not only the musical world, but in the literary world as well, with some of the literature and the novels being sort of that macabre type of theme. And the composers joined in the fun. So we hope you enjoy In the Hall of the Mountain King. Our next tune, of course, is also from the classical tunes that we think of associated with Halloween. And this is one of my personal favorites. It's the Funeral March of the Marionette by Gounod, written in 1872. Again, during that 19th century time of exploration of the dark, the macabre. It was intended to be part of a suite. But he just sort of abandoned the suite and went right for just the Funeral March of the Marionette, originally written for piano. Maybe you didn't know that. But it was originally written for piano. Then, of course, it was readapted. And we know it today, of course, as the theme of the Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which was one of my favorite things growing up, seeing some of those great Alfred Hitchcock stories, and of course, we love all the Alfred Hitchcock movies as well. So we hope you enjoy the Funeral March of the Marionette. Next, we come to perhaps our favorite Halloween classical piece, and that, of course, is Danse Macabre. Danse Macabre was written by Saint-Saëns in 1874. It was written as a tone poem, and in this story, it really actually tells a story. It is what we consider a programmatic work, music that tells a story. And in this tone poem, Death appears at midnight, and Death is the fiddle player. And he calls all the dead to rise from the graveyard as he plays on his fiddle. And of course, they dance about and have a merry time. And in the middle of their fun, all of a sudden, everything stops because the cock crows, you hear it's morning time, and they all have to go back to the graveyard and rest. But it is one of our favorites. Grace actually played the solo part, if you remember, in high school with our high school orchestra. And we have a wonderful arrangement for full orchestra and fiddle. And I know that's one of our favorites because we did it together when you were in high school. So that was a great tradition for us. And I'll bet it's going to be a legacy that you bring to your students as well. things that Grace and I have shared as a mother and daughter is a love for the theater. And we know that Halloween has one particular musical that we kind of associate with Halloween. Of course, it's Phantom of the Opera. And when Grace was a little girl, her dad and I bought this CD. I don't know if you remember. It was the Eric Kunzel's Cincinnati, I think it was the Cincinnati Pops Orchestra. Oh, no, it was the Cleveland Pops Orchestra. We'll figure that out. I'll figure that out. But anyways, Eric Kunzel put out this wonderful CD called Chiller. Do you remember that? And it had great sound effects. It had, the beginning of the Phantom of the Opera. And we always listened to it in the car. It was lots of fun. But one of the things we always love about Phantom of the Opera is that Grace really, you sort of identify with the Christine character, and she always wanted to play that. We never really got that opportunity. But I will tell you a cute little story about Phantom of the Opera. Grace and I went to see the 25th anniversary of the Phantom on Broadway. And it just so happens, I believe it was with a school trip, and we went and we got to see a couple shows, and that was the one we got to see. And the Phantom of that time was Hugh Pinero. Now, when we saw the Broadway show, we didn't know who Hugh Pinero was until we went to the show. And we both were blown away by his performance. He just embodied the Phantom. We just absolutely, and I've seen the Phantom many times, but for us, Hugh was our Phantom. Well, lo and behold, not long after we got to see Hugh on Broadway, here at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, IUP, local university, of course, in Indiana, the Pittsburgh Symphony came and was going to be performing a Valentine's concert featuring Hugh Pinero. And we started to do a little research, realized that that was the Phantom, and we got to see the Phantom, and we were so excited. So it was a very gloomy, horrible weather night. Nobody had purchased tickets because it was Valentine's Day, and everybody was out eating dinner. And literally, I was very sad to see it wasn't a giant crowd over at Fisher Auditorium at IUP, but Grace and I were like third row, right on the end, and we just had the greatest time meeting Hugh Pinero. Because the weather was bad, the whole audience went trucking out, ran away basically, because everyone was trying to get home because the weather was bad. But my husband had driven us, and we were feeling a little bit secure, so we stayed and we got to meet Hugh in person. So for us, that was a huge, great tradition for us, and we still love the Phantom of the Opera. So we're going to do one of our favorites for you from the Phantom, and that is All I Ask of You. Now we're moving on to movie themes. And when I think Halloween, one of my absolute favorite movie themes are the tunes from the Pirates of the Caribbean. And when Grace and her sister were growing up, this was absolutely one of our favorite movie series to go to. And I'll tell a little fun story. I don't know if you remember this, but when Pirates of the Caribbean first came out, we decided we wanted to see it at the drive-in movies. And so we went to go, I think we were up at Carrolltown near Evansburg, went up to the drive-ins, and it was the second feature. So it didn't even start till 9 o'clock or something really late at night. And these girls were pretty young, and everybody was asleep by the end of it. And I was the only one wakeful enough to drive home. And I remember feeling very insecure when we were driving and it was a full moon. And of course, if you remember in the Pirates of the Caribbean, that's the full moon that brings them out in their deadly state. And I remember driving home and seeing that full moon as we were driving home. But it's one of those memories I'll never forget about Pirates of the Caribbean. We love the movies. So here's a little medley from Pirates of the Caribbean. Our next tune is going to explore a legacy of music that has been particularly interesting for us as a family. Some of you may know I was in a Celtic band for years called Heartstrings, and a lot of my musical background here, just in this area, has been with folk music and Celtic music. Grace and I used to attend all kinds of Celtic workshops and summer camps. And this was always a song that I performed. It's called She Moved Through the Fair. But when Grace grew up and became a wonderful singer, it was just the perfect song for her to sing. And so we played it a few times here and there. But the wonderful story of She Moved Through the Fair, it's this Celtic story of love and loss, which is pretty much every Irish tune when you think of it. But it's about a young man who goes out and meets a beautiful girl at a fair. And they fall in love. There is some kind of an encounter between the two of them. We're not exactly sure. They met together a few times, but they never got married. They never wed. Something happened. There was a rift between the two lovers, and it didn't work out. And he talks about, in the story, that was the last that I saw of my dear. He didn't see her anymore. And in the very last verse, this is how it becomes a Halloween tune. In the very last verse, she comes back to haunt him. And she is a ghost. And he said, last night she came to me. She came softly in. And of course, it was her ghost. It was the apparition of his love. And it's just a wonderful, haunting melody. And we sort of associate it with Halloween time as well. So we hope you love our traditional Irish version of She Moved Through the Fair.
this she did say, it will not be long, love, till our wedding day. She stepped away from me, and she moved through the fair. And fondly I watched her go here and go there. Then she went her way homeward with one star awake, as the swan in the evening moves over the lake. The people were saying no to her way, but one has a sorrow that never was said, and I smiled as she passed with her goods and her gear. And that was the last that I saw of my dear. Last night she came to me. She came softly in. So softly she came, her feet made no din, and she came close beside me, and this she did say, it will not be long, love, till our wedding day.
Our last tune we're going to do in honor of our gracious host, Mark Koch, and we want to thank him so much for hosting us in this wonderful spaceship module. And this last tune comes from the jazz tradition, and really that is Grace's legacy that's going to go on. She's much more of a jazz performer than I am. She's in the Center Dimensions jazz group at Penn State and has been this whole time through her career at Penn State. And we know she's going to do big things. If you didn't know it, Grace is also a trumpet player as well as a fiddle and a singer. So she's the triple threat right here. But we're so excited for you going on and doing a lot with all kinds of music, and especially with the jazz tradition. And so this one is a classic, Fly Me to the Moon. One, two, oh, 1, 2, 3. We want to thank you for joining us for the very first installment of a virtual cushion concert with the Altoona Symphony Orchestra. Traditions and Legacies, Spooky Tunes from Outer Space. Thank you so much for being with us. We want to thank our sponsors, T. Dean Lauer and Jane Young Lauer Trust and the Wolf Kuhn Foundation, along with Mark Koch, for hosting us here at this awesome space module. We hope you'll go and check it out. Drive down the street, and it's on the front lawn here, and it's just been such a blast. Get it? A blast? Being here today, and we hope you enjoy our presentation. Thanks so much, and stay safe. Happy Halloween.